Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the weekend edition, but it's going to be a little bit different today. We will have Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter join us in about an hour, but we've been able to sort of move them back to, again, talk about some really important issues in the news, which we will be talking about. But we wanted you to have an opportunity to hear from the Kendrick Brothers. We have done interviews with them by phone, but they're both in studio with us today. And we're going to be talking about the film that is out today, Show Me the Father, which many of the staff have seen. I've not seen it, and they won't tell me all the punchlines, so I am going to be, like you, asking questions as we go along there. But my wife has seen it, thinks it's one of the best films she has ever seen, so that's probably high praise, as well as one of our staff members said the same thing. So I'm starting to sense all of us need to make our way to the film. But first of all, we'll be talking about Show Me the Father. That's coming out today, and as you know, we like to focus a lot of time and attention on various faith-affirming films, and we've certainly over the years talked about War Room and Courageous and Fireproof and Facing the Giants and so many others, but this will be significant. And by the way, before the hour's up, we also have a link to Courageous, the Legacy Edition, and we'll talk about that as well. But first of all, let's go around the round table. They're in studio, so you can watch online if you'd like to. Alex Kendrick is with us, and of course has been involved in all of those different films. Also the author of The Love Dare, Resolution for Men, The Battle Plan for Prayer. Of course, you and your family have attended Sherwood Church there in Albany, Georgia. And so, Alex, just great to have you in studio.
Thanks for having us. It's an honor to be here in person.
It is. And Stephen is also well known as the other part of that duo. You've actually been in church ministry for some time.
Yes.
And, of course, have worked on all these films as well. So, Stephen Kendrick, thank you as well.
My pleasure. Really glad to talk to you, Kerby.
And I'm glad to have both of you here. And anywhere along the way, you can both jump in or maybe nudge each other, because I really want to get into this. But we talk so often, Alex, let me come to you first, about fatherlessness. And we have done programs on this for many years. We've also had people sitting in that chair like that you interview there, like Tony Evans, talking about the importance of having an earthly father, and then how sometimes people have a biased view of their heavenly father because they've had a very difficult relationship with their earthly father. And so in some respects, that's what this documentary is all about, isn't it?
It is. You know, our first concept of what God is like comes from our dad. So if we had a loving dad, one that was interested in spending time with us, we imagine God to be loving and wanting to spend time with us. The other side of the coin is if you had a dad that was distant or abusive, you imagine God to be distant and possibly mean-spirited towards you. So we make that early connection, and so that's why it's so crucial for a father to love his kids, to emulate the characteristics of the Lord. And so, and of course, Jesus said, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Jesus' characteristics are God's characteristics, basically the fruit of the Spirit. And so this movie touches on that and what happens if it's not done the right way.
Yes. Stephen, you've worked in ministry, and you recognize that sometimes you talk to individuals that just have a jaundiced view of their heavenly father because they've had a difficult earthly father.
And they relate to God as God, but not as Father, oftentimes. Research says that over the last 4 centuries, some of the most prominent atheists have this in common. They had distant or abusive fathers. And it caused them to hate the God or reject the God that they didn't want to believe in. And at the same time, we have such an opportunity. A father has such an opportunity to represent the character of God to his children. Ephesians chapter 3 says that God created fatherhood on earth out of the fatherhood of God. And in Show Me the Father, the movie, we point out that the 7 roles a dad is supposed to play in his kids' lives reflect the 7 roles that our Heavenly Father plays in our lives on a daily basis.
So again, some great material that's here in the film. But first of all, I always like to early on encourage people not only to think about going, but bringing people with them. And one of the things, matter of fact, I've got a few people from my Sunday school class watching right now through the glass, that we almost always rent out one of the theaters. We don't quite fill it out, but we get pretty close, because bringing people along is really important. And there's a place right now where, as people are hearing this and thinking, well, that may be something I might want to go to, I hope that they'll start thinking about the fact that they will click on that button, which is showmethefathermovie.com, and there's a place to get tickets. But think about getting more than just a ticket for yourself.
It's an outreach tool, and what we do when we make these films, we ask the Lord to bless them such that it's not just entertainment, and there is a level of entertainment, but that, there's plenty of entertainment out there in the world. We want to make movies that matter, that touch the souls, that leaves lasting fruitfulness. So when you take someone to this movie, it is, I believe, as effective as if you just took them to a service or, church. And of course, it depends on the service, but we need the preaching of the Word of God. But sometimes people are moved when they see it visually played out, like Jesus would tell parables, and he would impart truth through parables. So when people see a demonstration, what does it look like to bless my son, to receive a blessing from the Lord? Yeah, and we play that out in the movie so that they now have an example. I've now seen what it could look like.
Yes, John Trent talks about the idea of a blessing and those kinds of ideas. Jim Daly's in the program, Stephen. I might talk about that because he's been on the program and talked about the fact that his family wasn't necessarily the one that you would consider you would use in a 50s sitcom, for example.
Right. Well, one of the most powerful stories in the movie Show Me the Father is to hear Jim Daly become very transparent, and he opens up and walks us through what it was like to grow up with an alcoholic father that abandoned them, basically, and for him to discover God as his perfect father. And as he got older, how that played out in his understanding of himself, his own identity, and in ministry, everything that he's doing at Focus on the Family, so much of that flows out of how God has redeemed his fatherhood story. And we've told people, it doesn't matter if you had a great dad or a poor dad. We know that your heart is connected to that story. You'll get teary-eyed and choked up if you really start telling your father's story. In our situation, our dad loved us, blessed us.
Right.
We have this strong connection with him, but God is better. And God is perfect. The word perfect is connected to the fatherhood of God consistently in Scripture. And Jim Daly walks through what it was like to discover God as his perfect father.
I might just mention that we do have a link to the trailer, and people can watch the trailer. I always encourage them not only to watch it, but then there's usually a share button, so you can put it on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed or something like that. And back to your point, although I have not seen the movie, the trailer makes you cry if you're not careful. So that is pretty good as well. Let me just, before I take a break, Alex, come to you, because this is a little different. A lot of people, when they think of these films, think of the fact that they are fictional. This is a documentary, your first full-length documentary.
It is, and the reason we did that after praying about it, we wanted to share real stories from various vantage points of a good father, a bad father, an absent father, and what would that look like? Because the audience is going to resonate and relate to one or more of those stories. And so we want to grab their heart early on. And these 5 stories that we share in the movie, all true. We didn't script anything. We just, interviewed them. We went out and filmed the footage, the B-roll, things like that, and we put it together. But these stories are amazing. They're wonderful at grabbing your heart and sharing God's love and truth. And at the end, we think people are going to walk out and desire 2 things: a closer walk with God themselves, seeing God as not just God, but as our Father, and secondly, that they're going to want to relate to their own earthly father, should he be alive, in a better way.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation. I know part of this story involves Stephen, so I want to talk about that as being a father. You talked about your father collectively, but if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you look at some of the COVID numbers, you will find that the statistics defy the spin placed on it by politicians and the media. That's the argument that Charles Cook uses in his latest commentary. All you need to do is look at the chart linked to my commentary to see that any spin by Democrats or Republicans or media personalities is wrong. His opening statement is also his conclusion. 2 presidents, 50 states, 195 countries, a multitude of different approaches, and still there's no rhyme or reason to this pandemic. If you look at the COVID death rate per 100,000 by state, you don't find any pattern. The spin we get from politicians and the media would have us believe that blue states would all be bunched in one area of the chart and red states would be bunched in the other. That is not what you find. Some liberal media commentators would have you believe that red states are bad and blue states are good. Another writer says North is good and the South is bad. Charles Cook has an answer for all those comments. If it were, what could possibly account for the death rate pairings of New York and Mississippi, of Alabama and Connecticut, of Michigan and Arkansas, of Texas and Delaware, of Idaho and Colorado? Or consider what is happening in Israel. I was supposed to be heading a tour to Israel. That's not happening, even though Israel has had heavily enforced lockdowns, mask mandates, and the most successful vaccination program anywhere. Yet the first country to fully vaccinate a majority of its citizens now has one of the world's highest daily infection rates. As I've said in previous commentaries, we need a bit more humility when making statements about the pandemic, and I might add we should ignore all the spin, which is proven to be false. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with us, Alex Kendrick and Stephen Kendrick. And if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Stephen, I thought I'd come back to you for just a minute because one of the interviews I did years ago, I even did a week of radio programs, was a man by the name of Paul Vitz. And the book is entitled The Faith of the Fatherless.
Yes.
And what I thought was so interesting, because I think you probably were familiar with that since you mentioned it,
yes,
is that he found that almost all the prominent atheists had a either defective relationship with their father or an absent relationship with their father. What was so intriguing is he went back and then said, well, let's look at some of the more prominent Christians, and they either had a very strong father or father substitute.
Yes.
In the case of William Wilberforce, it really was an individual that, of course, later wrote probably one of the most famous hymns ever. And so there is a striking similarity that you are seeing, and the need for a film like this, Show Me the Father.
Well, if you think about the bus driver jumping out of the bus midway, what happens to the people that are left on the bus?
Good line.
And when dads disconnect from their families or abandon their children, what often happens is the family ends up in a ditch. And I'm not just speaking, theoretically here. If you look at the research and the statistics, the number one common denominator of men in prison, of kids that get on drugs, of kids that drop out of school, of teen pregnancy, depression amongst teenagers is either fatherlessness or an abusive father. He's disconnecting from them. So this one common denominator, you're like, of what causes people to end up in prison? Well, what do they have in common? It's not race. It is not socioeconomic. It's not education. It's fatherlessness, this key issue. And so if we can come back to God's desire the last verse in the Old Testament, to turn the hearts of fathers back to their children and children to their fathers. One of the greatest privileges of my life is being a dad. One of the greatest joys I have in life, to represent the Father to my children. And so we want to do that through this film, Show Me the Father. But we don't do it in a browbeating kind of way at all. It's very inspirational. You're watching tragic stories. You're watching redemptive, inspirational stories at the same time. But we come back to what God can do in our lives when we submit our lives to Jesus and we let the Heavenly Father step in.
Yes. Well, and again, it's football season. You have some football stories there. Anybody that's in the SEC, I figure you're going to have some football stories in the film. Right. So that is certainly the case as well. And Alex, let me come back to this, because this fatherlessness shows up in the prisons, because I remember years ago they were making available Mother's Day cards to all the prisoners, and they almost ran out of the people that wanted the Mother's Day cards. So they said, oh, well, we'll do one for Father's Day. Nobody took a card. Right. And it tells you a lot about what's going on in our culture, doesn't it?
It does. You know, there's a void in all of us when we don't have that connection to our earthly father. And, you know, we're going to fill that in some way. And usually when you see all of these issues in our culture that we're talking about, you know, the runaways, the drug addicts, the crime, things like that, and there's a direct tie back to the lack of a father influence. You know, we also see that when a father's in the home and he goes to church, it's mostly likely that the family goes with him. If only the mom goes, it's most likely that the kids do not go with her. And so a father's influence is crucial. He carries a mantle, and ultimately we're accountable to the Lord. You know, I'm accountable. I have 6 kids. Stephen has 6 kids. Our older brother Shannon has 7 kids, and they're our homework assignment. They're our lasting legacy behind us. And so what a blessing, you know, and we want a quiver full of arrows that we can fire. And so when you look at it that way, man, it's an honor to be a dad and to raise and pour into my kids and to love them and then watch them bloom as the Lord directs them.
I was just going to bring that up. 6 children. Mm-hmm. One of yours is adopted, if I remember right, that's part of the story. Can we share that? I don't want to break all of it, but there are some great stories that I've heard about from the movie.
Yes. As we were editing together Show Me the Father, Alex came to me and he said, Stephen, we need to tell your daughter's adoption story. Mm-hmm. It will fit in so well with this movie. So my wife and I prayed about it, and we were interviewed, and we basically unfold what God did. It wasn't what we did. But back when we were flying to New York to approve the final print on the movie Courageous, I'm sitting on an airplane. God speaks to me through John chapter 10, verse 16. And communicates to my heart, I want you to be open to adoption. This was totally unexpected.
Amazing.
I turned to my wife on the airplane, and I said, I think God is wanting us to be open to adoption. Well, she had been praying for me for over 2 years that God would turn my heart towards adoption. But she didn't want to be Sarah, you know, telling Abraham to do something outside of the will of God and experience the repercussions later on. So she wanted it to be of the Lord, and God did it. I mean, he started turning my heart. If you fast forward 2 years later, we fill out the adoption paperwork. We start getting these referrals. And the first 4 referrals that we were wanting to accept, there was this heaviness, this lack of peace. Colossians 3:15 says, let the peace of God rule in your hearts. And we had this no peace about this. Something is not right. So we turned down these 4 precious girls that we were looking to adopt. And on the 5th one, the total peace of God. But her condition was worse. She had born with half a heart. It's called tricuspid atresia is her her condition. So we found out she'd been born on Valentine's Day of 2011. And my wife said she was born on Valentine's Day with a broken heart. And so we said, yes, we're going to adopt this baby girl. We're going to ask God to provide all the education, everything else. And then I went back and looked in my Bible. And there next to John 10:16 was written 2/14/2011. The same day that God spoke to me on that airplane. She was being born in China on the other side of the world. And when we adopted her and brought her home, we saw her identity completely change. She went from being this unwanted burden in a communist country to being a beloved, welcome blessing in a Christian home with free access to my lap, my heart, you know, all the provision, everything else, with siblings now, joint inheritance with the kids. And we realized, just like Ephesians 1 and 2 says, that God adopts us, it says, when we place our faith in Christ. And we are blessed with every blessing Scripture says we are his beloved children now because of our faith in Jesus. And we have equal access to his heart, his throne, Ephesians says, with a heavenly home waiting for us. That our identity, God's identity, is discovered through this picture of adoption.
And again, we talk about these children that have been adopted that become Christians, and we say they're twice adopted.
That's right.
You've got the biblical principle of adoption, and of course you have the physical one, and it's an incredible story, which, again, we don't want to tip your hand too much, but I think you got a pretty good idea of why everybody wants to go to the theater. So, Alex, talk about that, because this opening weekend is really important, and I think it's important to send a signal to Hollywood and to other filmmakers that people want these kinds of films.
Every time we release a movie, and this is the 7th time we've put one in theaters, something will happen on opening weekend. However many people go, that sends a signal to our distributor in Hollywood.
Right.
And they either expand it to more theaters, which means more people can see it, which for us means more ministry and influence, or they start decreasing the number of theaters because people don't go. And so I would never want to twist someone's arm to go, but I will say this movie is worth seeing.
Yes.
It is worth taking people to. It's got a powerful message. It is engaging. There's some humor. There's some heart-grabbing moments. It is just worth seeing on the theater, and so when you invite your family, your friends, your peers, your coworkers to go with you, you're going to leave fuller. Your heart's going to be full. You're going to be inspired, and you're helping send a message saying this is what we long for. This is the kind of movies that we want to see. And then our distributor says, hey, we need to add more theaters, and again, the ministry expands. So the way you can help us is by praying for us, and then take someone to see the movie.
And again, we have all that information on the website here. You can click on either the picture of Alex or Stephen. It'll take you to the same spot, or we even have a special place where it shows the Show Me the Father and the trailer, because I want to empower all of you to take what you're hearing right now and maximize that. You know 2 or 3 people, maybe you know lots of people, maybe a whole Sunday school class that needs to attend that. And Alex, as you were talking about how powerful the movie was, we have an observation room here, and I saw certain heads shaking that had already seen the movie. So I don't think I've seen that much response to any of your movies except this one. So there must be some really exciting parts about that. So let's take a break. When we come back, I do want to open up the phones. Perhaps you have a comment or a question about this, or maybe a testimony. Maybe you've seen War Room or Courageous, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Fireproof, Facing the Giants, Flywheel, on and on, Overcomers. There are so many of those that we can obviously mention. If you'd like to join us, we would certainly welcome your phone calls. That number is 1-800-351-1212. We'll talk a little bit more about just a few other elements, but we don't want to take all of it away. Spoiler alerts, of course, on Show Me the Father. As you go there, we have a place where you can watch the trailer, where you can get tickets, and you might want to do what my Sunday school class has done almost every time. We just see if we can sell out one of those theaters, and then we're all just sitting there together, and then at the end, we go out to eat and talk about some of the events taking place. So that's an opportunity. Again, Friday, the September 10th, but of course, all the way through the weekend, the 11th and 12th, are great opportunities to send a signal that you want more of these kinds of films. Let's take a break, though, and when we come back, I see some phone calls coming in, so maybe we'll take a call or two. We are privileged to have in studio with us today Alex and Stephen Kendrick, and we will be back right after these important messages.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. If not, sit back and listen. Of course, next hour we'll be having an open line where you can make some comments if you'd like. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford will be with us, and we will be talking about quite a bit. It has been a busy week, and of course, it's the day before 9/11, so we'll be talking about that. Of course, the abortion law here that actually was a bill and became a law is controversial right now. We'll talk about vaccine mandates and all sorts of other things that we'll be covering. But if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. 800-251-1212. In studio with us, Alex and Stephen Kendrick, and what a privilege to have both of you here today. But Alex, help us out for just a minute, because just a minute ago we had somebody call off air and said, okay, what movie theater is it in? Help us find out. Since we're broadcasting all over the country, they need to know their zip code, and then they can find where that movie theater might be that is actually carrying it, right?
That's exactly right. So if you go to showmethefathermovie.com, that's the website.
Right.
Just type in your browser, showmethefathermovie.com, all one word.
Or we have the link here.
Yep, and then the link comes up, and then at the top, we have a menu item at the top that you can click on to find your theater. And when you click on that, it will allow you an option of putting in your city or your zip code. And when you type that in, all of the nearby theaters will pop up, and you just pick the one that you want to go to.
And again, I, of course, am in the Dallas area, and I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through all the theaters. So you've had a really wide release.
It's 1,000 theaters.
It is amazing how many that you have. And, of course, the success next week is dependent on success this week, right?
That's exactly right. Basically, on Monday morning, all the theater chains will look at, the top movies that did well, and they keep them in their rooms or expand them to bigger rooms. And the movies that did not do well, they kick them out, and bring in the new ones. And so I remember when we saw our first movie, Flywheel, it lasted 6 weeks. We were so excited. Facing the Giants lasted 17 weeks. But it's because people were getting behind the films and supporting them, and then using them for ministry, because it is our desire to not only move you emotionally, entertain you, but the movies, we want them to make a lasting impact on your life, and for you to use them as a ministry tool. And we've seen people come to Christ from watching Show Me the Father. We've seen people already reconcile with their dads since they've seen it. And some of them have said, I wanted to just go home and love on my kids. After watching this movie, I was so inspired.
And again, Alex, with War Room, there's a good example of that. I think everybody had a new dedication to the issue of prayer because of that, right?
It was amazing. There was a construction guy in Michigan, and he had not seen War Room, and it was still in theaters. It had been out for several weeks, and he said, why in the world am I keep being requested to come expand people's closets so they can have a prayer area? He said, it's like 5 different times people have hired me to come expand rooms in their house just for prayer. So what's going on? And a friend said, did you see the movie War Room? And he said, no, what is that? So he was invited to go see it. Then he understood. But, it is not so, War Room wasn't so much about a prayer closet as it was about having a place that you seek the Lord, that you spend time with God. So if it's in a prayer closet like Matthew 6:6 says, then fantastic. But we're just urging people to seek the Lord.
And again, you've given some great opportunities. Of course, I know you were with last night our good friend Tony Evans, but Priscilla, and you think about some of these other people. Of course, we see Alex in all of these movies anyway, don't we, Stephen? So, of course, that is the case. But talk about how this could be used by a ministry. I teach a Sunday school class, and I would love to not only encourage our class to make their way to that, which I'm sure we will be doing, but also there is an opportunity afterwards to do that, and there are other resources that I have found on your website. So again, you can go to showmethefathermovie.com, or if you don't remember all that, all you have to do is go to pointofview.net, click on the picture of either of these individuals, and you have videos, you have stories, you have tools and other things. There's a movie poster, there are web banners. So talk about what's there, because you have just an incredible amount of resources for all of our listeners.
Well, we want to empower the body of Christ, and our passion is the Great Commission. And we use filmmaking as an excuse to lead people to Jesus and make disciples. And so we love the church. Alex and I served in church ministry for over 20 years. And so as we're making our films, we are asking the Lord, would you enable us to communicate the gospel in a fresh way through this film? And we've had thousands of people come to Christ from the movies. And it's been amazing to watch the body of Christ take these tools and to reach people that won't go to their local church, but they will show up in the theater, or they'll give a copy of Fireproof to a couple who's struggling, with their marriage, or they'll sit down and do discipleship. Men have gone through and done discipleship with other men using the movie Courageous. War Room has launched prayer ministries internationally with what we've seen the Lord do. So with Show Me the Father, you have a great opportunity because, again, you're going to grab people's hearts. Even hardened criminals get a little tender when you start talking about their father story because there's woundedness there. And we're using that window to reach people. I believe one of the biggest breakthroughs in someone's spiritual journey can happen when they begin to relate to God as a loving, perfect Father.
Yes.
And Jesus didn't just come to save us, but he says, I came to represent the Father. He said, I came to speak the words of the Father, do the will of the Father, bring glory to the Father. And through him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus says, no one comes to the Father but through me. We can have a relationship with God as Father. And what we've been praying for from the beginning with the movie Show Me the Father is that people 5, 10, 20 years down the road would look back and say, God became my Father after I saw this film.
Yes.
So if you go to showmethefathermovie.com, you can see the trailers, resources, things that we have that are free, that are on there that you can download and use to reach the people in your circumference of influence.
Again, the Great Commission, and one of the things that my ministry, Pro Ministries, has done is we just did a survey about a year ago, over 3,000 individuals, because in the past we've always looked at born-again evangelicals and those kinds of people, but this time we surveyed thousands and thousands of people to follow a group which we call the unaffiliated. You used to call them the nuns, but people get confused when I say that. Unaffiliated. These are the people that either say they're atheist, agnostic, or no preference. Well, that percentage, especially among the Generation Y and Generation Z, has almost tripled in the time in which we have been doing these surveys over the last decade or plus. Of course, we had George Barn and all sorts of other people on this program as well. And more recently, there were people saying, well, we still have a lot of people that are going to come back to the church. And so my colleague and I wrote a piece that was in Christian Post in which it said they're not coming back. And I said, we just had the game of certainly the idea of if you build it, they will come. And I said, well, it was a great line for a movie, but it is not true. We have built 350,000 churches in America, and they're not coming. Now, some will come and some will watch online, but almost everybody will walk into a theater.
Yes.
And so they'll have a chance to, and especially since they know it's a documentary, they think, okay, I'm kind of seeing what that might be. Show me the Father. And that is just a great evangelistic opportunity, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting that when people are invited to come, most of the time they say yes.
Yes.
It's incredible. And so you think, well, but I don't want to be turned down or whatever. Well, it's worth the risk. Invite that coworker, invite that friend, invite your neighbor to go with you, and let's see what God does. But put yourself in a scenario and ask the Lord to work, and then leave it in His hands and watch what He does. And we found over and over when people invite people to the theater, just like we said earlier, the security guard gets right with God, and people that were not even supposed to be there getting right with God. The Lord, and Tony Evans says the Lord's got a GPS and He can redirect people in the right direction. But let's get them there. And so it's an act of ministry as it is much entertainment or anything else.
Well, and again, Stephen, you as a pastor know you've told your congregation to invite people to come to Sherwood Church. But the bottom line is that some did, most didn't. But almost everybody that you invite to a movie usually will go to a movie, right?
Well, they love to sit down with the popcorn in their lap and to be entertained, but our deal is we don't want a meal to just be delicious. We want it to be nutritious. Yes. And so when people sit down and watch a movie, how many times have you watched a movie and you thought, what a waste of 2 hours. I want my $20 back, please. This was
I want my 2 hours back.
I want my 2 hours back, too. And so we are big believers in let's redeem that time. So from the beginning of Show Me the Father to the end, your attention is grabbed. You're on an emotional roller coaster. We tried to make it very cinematic, the way that it is edited together, and we have an original film score that's being used. You get hooked into this story. You will go on the same peaks and valleys as if you're watching a feature film, but you're ending with a focus on the Heavenly Father, and there's healing that can take place. There's inspiration that can take place. Many people have said, I feel loved after I watch this movie, and it's a rewatcher. People, when they walk out, say, I know 10 friends right now that need to go see this tomorrow, and I want to take them, because life change can take place when the Holy Spirit is in concert with the prayers of believers and the Word of God is being proclaimed.
I've seen all sorts of people already that have been to the premiere that you had at the National Religious Broadcaster saying, when's the Blu-ray coming out? Because I'm going to show this in my neighborhood. So let's take a break because this is coming out today. But since I won't have these guys with me 2 weeks from now, when we come back, there is something else that you may want to go and see, and I think you will. In theaters on September 24th is Courageous, the Legacy. And we're going to talk about that that right after these important messages. Stay tuned.
Once in a while, a law is enacted that shocks us in the way it illuminates the difference between good and evil. This happened on September 1st, when Texas's new heartbeat law went into effect. Here's what conservative writer and podcaster Matt Walsh said about it, quoting him, "If you have ever had any doubts about which is the bad side in the culture war, this week ought to clear up your confusion. Leftists are mad, screamingly, deliriously mad, that fewer babies will die in Texas. A lot fewer babies will die. The law bans abortions when there is a detectable fetal heartbeat, which typically occurs around 6 weeks into a pregnancy. It's estimated that 80 to 85% of abortions performed in Texas take place after 6 weeks gestation. That the law will remain in force is not a given. Other states have introduced and even passed heartbeat bills only to see them blocked in court. Texas's law is written in a way that makes this more difficult and time-consuming. The Supreme Court, in allowing the law to take effect, only delayed consideration of its constitutionality. In the interim, many, many babies will be saved. Unsurprisingly, the pro-abortion left, fearing the demise of Roe, is apoplectic. President Biden promised a whole-of-government response to insulate women and providers from the impact of the new law. In one odd statement, he seemed to repudiate numerous prior statements and declare he does not believe life begins at conception. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's scheduling a vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe and invalidate nearly all state-level restrictions on abortion. Heartbeat bills won't destroy Roe, but they make an unambiguous statement that abortion snuffs out a human life. This fall, Mississippi's ban on abortions after 15 weeks will be argued before the Supreme Court. The good guys hope the decision will overturn Roe, ending any notion that the Constitution contains a right to abortion. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention that we really do encourage you to see Show Me the Father this weekend if you possibly can. But I wanted you to know that 2 weeks from now, on September 24th, is Courageous. Now, again, we have in studio with us Alex and Stephen. And Alex, I'll come to you because, first of all, when I was looking at that, I said, you've changed a little bit over the 10 years, as have all of us. But a lot of people might say, I saw Courageous. No, you haven't seen this, because this is a completely remastered and all sorts of additions to it. Can you talk us through this a little bit?
Yep. So almost a year ago, Stephen and I were talking about the fact that Courageous was almost 10 years old, and that the principles presented in the movie are just as applicable today as they were a decade ago. And we now have another generation of fathers that didn't have kids, so they would look at this movie very differently. But we didn't want to just re-release it. So we talked to our distributor and we said, what if we spruced it up? What that meant for us was we have completely re-edited the movie, added some scenes back into the movie that were originally shot but deleted. We added new shots. We added score. We added some special effects. And then we shot a brand new ending. So it's going to surprise a lot of people. They're watching the movie. Some of it will obviously be familiar because they saw a version of it 10 years ago. But they're going to keep going, wow, that's new, that's new, that's new. You get to the ending of the movie and it jumps forward 10 years. We get to see where all of these characters ended up 10 years later, and we shot it 10 years later. So we literally are 10 years older, and you see the kids that were 10 years old back then, now they're 20. And then all the parents are older. And how fun it was to get everybody back together, shoot this new ending. It's going to be a very satisfying ending. And so we show that there is hope. Even when you've fallen, there is hope to get back up. There's the camaraderie when men get together, when women get together and pray for one another. It's just so powerful. So Courageous, best version of the movie, and I can't wait. It comes out September 24th, also in theaters.
Yeah, so that's just 2 weeks from today. Stephen, again, celebrating 10 years of changed fathers and changed families. So in a sense, this is hand in glove with what we're talking about today, isn't it?
Well, and the movie starts off in theaters. It starts off with us sharing some of the impact stories as to what God has done all over the world through Courageous over the last 10 years. And it really is mind-blowing to hear about officers in Panama showing up in uniform to see Courageous and saying we can transform our nation if the police will walk with integrity like is featured in this movie. And to hear the stories from other countries of people saying, you know, the men standing in uniform. Alex was in Ecuador, hundreds of men in uniform saying, I'm going to do a version of this resolution that I've seen in this movie, Courageous, and their wives putting a medal around their necks. They're crying together. And people coming to Christ all over the world. There are 1,000 police officers that came to Christ in the Philippines when Courageous was released. But more than just en masse, you know, men that are in uniform, but dads seeing for the first time, what does it look like to lead my family? Because so many men, they feel like they're driving in the dark. They're like, my dad wasn't a spiritual leader. He didn't model Christ in my home. I don't even know what that looks like. You keep telling me to lead my family and train up my children to follow the Lord. I don't know how to do that. So we try to show that in the movie Courageous. Our dad had something that he would say to us, start where you are and go forward as fast as you can. And you see these men in the movie hit a point halfway through the film where they realize, you know, I'm trying to stop the gangs on the streets, but these gangs are connected to fatherlessness, but my own kids at home are not seeing me. I need to step up and spiritually lead them.
Good.
Oh, and Alex, I was just going to say that one of the resources that is there, since we talked with Stephen about Show Me the Father, these resources, you've got that resolution that was part of the film and a number of other resources. So talk about some of those things that are available.
So we originally had a resolution for men. It's a book, and it walks through these principles that we display. And there were thousands of men that wanted that document resolution to post it on their home, to sign it at the bottom, commit to it. Well, if you go to our website, courageousthemovie.com, we want you to download it. You can have it for free. You know, men were doing resolution ceremonies all over America and in other countries, so we want to continue that. So we're just giving that away. Now, the book Resolution for Men is still available, and I took my sons through it. You know, it's an awesome mentoring tool, a discipleship tool. It walks through biblically what we're called to do by the Lord. And so the Resolution for Men, and then its companion Resolution for Women was written by Priscilla Shirer. It's also available. So again, not trying to just sell books, but these are resources that will help people in what God calls them to do and how to do it effectively. And so if you go to courageousthemovie.com, you can get tickets, find theaters, and see these resources.
And let me again mention that we have both of those links on the website. Again, it's courageousthemovie.com, which, because it's a few more words, you can certainly do the simple thing, and that is to go to pointofview.net. Click on the pictures. We have one for Show Me the Father, one for Courageous Legacy. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what's next. I mean, you got two coming out back to back. Do you have anything else in the pipeline here?
We have a whole list of things in the prayer incubator, is what we call it, that we're praying over.
Yes.
We're praying over episodic ideas. We're praying over other documentary ideas. And Alex actually has a feature film idea that he has been developing that we're excited about. And so we filmed a movie this past spring that I can't tell you about yet, but we're hoping that it will be released sometime next year as well. But we're praying, again, Scripture says in Ephesians 5, redeem the time, make the most of every opportunity, knowing the days are evil. And so our world is broken, and our nation desperately needs revival. They need the gospel. They need the church to rise up and be healthy and strong. And so we're committed to doing what we can with the resources that we have, with the influence that we have, to continue to shine the light of the gospel through film.
And I think there's a lesson of being dependent on the Lord and being perseverant, because I bet if I were to say, 20 years ago, this was everything that you had in your mind, you're going to be looking at me like, no, I didn't see any of this coming. Right. And yet this, I think, is a good example of by step, just enough light for the next step you take. You guys have been so successful over these years.
And I would ask even the listeners, if you will, pray for these films. Pray
Please.
for the people that are going to see these, because we want tender hearts when people are presented the truth, the gospel, and these biblical principles. We want them to receive them. We want God to do whatever He wants to. And we have seen elements of what we would call revival break out in theaters. People stay after the movie and they circle up and they're praying, and the people that come in to clean the theater are like, what's going on here? This is like a church service in here. And so these theaters can be redeemed, and so we're going to keep making films that bring the light and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if you go support them, go see them, take people, and then pray for them that God would use them to spread His word.
Well, I want you to know, those of us here at Point of View, we're for you. We believe in you and have been so excited about this. And I know probably the next time we'll be talking by phone, but it was just a delight to have both of you in studio today.
Thank you. Our delight. Thank you, brother, so much.
One last time, let me just mention that if all of this came fast and furious and you say, I want to hear it again, you can go to our website, pointofview.net, click on that red button that says watch, or you can go to the YouTube channel. It'll be up there within about an hour, or just hit listen and a podcast. You probably know somebody that needs to hear this right now, and so we encourage you to maybe pass it on to them. We have the links to both of the trailers, so you could actually take the time to hit that share button, put it on your Facebook page, put it on your Twitter feed. That would be an opportunity to expand that. But one last time for Alex and Stephen, we really want you to come to the theater this weekend. This is a great opportunity to have an impact in your life. What will happen is, as soon as you walk out, you're saying, I know 5 people I need to get to the next showing of that, and maybe you can get them there as well. And so this is a great opportunity, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to preempt what we normally do on our weekend edition, to get you both in studio. So again, thank you for being with us today.
God bless you, Kirby. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We will, in just a few minutes, have Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter sitting here. We have Penna Dexter's commentary, which has to do with the Texas heartbeat law. It was a bill, but it became a law. Why is it that we had 12 different laws similar to this that did not become law? Why did it become law? Why is the Justice Department now suing the state of Texas over that? So we'll be talking about that. Kelly Shackelford talking about religious liberty. This one will actually get your blood boiling just a little bit. We have a lot more to cover, so we will do that right after these important messages.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I think y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition around the round table, of course, is Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford. We're so thrilled that they could be here. We're going to be talking about religious discrimination. We're going to talk about the vaccine mandate. We'll be talking about the Texas abortion law and much, much more. We will do our best, Penna, to get it all in 1 hour, because we wanted to spend some time last hour with the Kendrick Brothers. Went very well, but we're glad you are both in studio with us today.
I'm glad they're doing what they're doing. And, I just finished watching an interview between Kevin Roberts of the Texas Public Policy Foundation and Congressman Chip Roy of Texas. And Kevin asked him at the end, what makes him hopeful? I mean, after all this, the things that are coming down on us that are really, really usurping our freedoms as a country. He said, look ahead to July 2026. It'll be the 250th birthday of America. Will we still have a country that's a beacon for freedom and for liberty, or will we not? And, we have our marching orders and our work cut out for us between now and then. That will be past some elections, even a presidential election. What will we do? What will we be? And I think a lot depends on the people who are listening to this program.
Well said. If you go to the website, pointofview.net, you'll see the first article we've posted, Discrimination Doesn't Fly, a woke airline. Matter of fact, it's an airline I like to travel on. But Kelly Shackelford, this is an incredible story. Tell us more.
Well, it's a sad story, but it is, I think all Americans have been watching these woke corporations attack people, harm people, but there's nothing they could do because they had the power. Like, look at big tech and all these woke corporate that people are like, disgusted with what they're doing. We actually finally have something where something can be done. And I think we're going to really have an impact. This will be the first major case in the country against the woke corporate attacks on people in the country. This is Alaska Airlines, and this is really sad because if you go back just to 2012, you used to get like scriptures on when you got your your food. This is Christian based, but they've totally lost their way, and now they do airplanes with LGBT colors and all this kind of stuff, and so they've gotten so woke it's ridiculous. What they've done is they sent out this is just an example, but this is our case. They sent out an internal communication to their employees saying we want everybody to get behind the Equality Act. It's just a great, great thing. And of course, everybody on Point of View probably knows the Equality Act is one of the most horrific ideas ever come up with. It literally strips away the religious freedom of every American under federal law, and says that in every LGBT case, religious freedom cannot be used as a defense. All your religious freedoms are taken away. Well, they sent this and they said, if you've got any feedback or ideas, let us know. So, we had a number of flight attendants, two of which we're representing, but one of them who we were on national news with last night, all she did is send in a question because she was a little concerned. She was like, do you really think that you can legislate morality like this?
Well, I think the big part about it was they asked for people to discuss it.
Exactly. And then she responded, asking a question. A number of people had very positive comments to her question. Then they took those down. Then they took her off her work schedule. Then they fired her. They fired her for asking a question when they asked for people's feedback. The other person who were representing, she said, as a Christian, I think this has got a lot of problems with it. And she expressed concerns. Fired her too. So if you want to know, this is, now people might say, well, that's just horrible. How would they do that? But usually it would be, but you can't do anything about it. Oh, but you can here. Because religion in the workplace is protected. And to say, you can say something, but if you say anything as a Christian that we disagree with, we're going to fire you. Even after we ask you to express your opinion, we're loving this as a case. And in fact, on our team, the top lawyer at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is on our team. When we showed her the facts, she was like, I can't even believe these facts. She's like, I want to be on this case. And so this is going to be, I think, a really important case. I would encourage all the Point of View listeners, go to firstliberty.org. I guess we have a link probably here at
First article takes you to First Liberty. Either way.
Go to pointofview.net. And you'll see, you can look at the video of Lacey and what she says about what happened. And it's just really an outrage. But it's a great example. If people don't understand what wokeism really is it's religion. It is a substitute by corporations who don't have true faith. It is an attempt to take traditional religion, push it out of the way, and say we have our own, except theirs is really bad. Because theirs doesn't allow you to disagree, to have any different opinions. They want to destroy you if you won't agree with everything, which is not like any Christian or church or synagogue I've been to and seen, and how they treat their people. So it's a really horrible religion. It's an evil. It's a substitute, and it's used to crush people. It's about as un-American as you get. The idea is no dissenting opinions allowed.
Yeah.
Believe like we do, or we will harm you. And fortunately, we have laws to protect against this.
So I watched the video with Lacey on it, and, the idea that you would be fired for your religious belief, which is so clearly the case here, it's really devastating to think about. But the silver lining, or the good side of this, is as this goes to the EEOC, and really, if she doesn't succeed there, if you all don't succeed in getting the right kind of a decision by them, then I'll be really shocked. And that will be really good when that decision comes, because these companies are just taking way too much of people's heart and soul out of them through these woke, ideologies that they're foisting on them. So, it will be a shot across the bow, I think, to other companies.
It will. And the great thing, the way the process works is you have to go to the EEOC first, because the federal government might say, well, we agree with you and we're going to take your case if they don't back down. But even if the federal government decides not to be involved, we can just file our lawsuit, and we're ready. So this is going to be, I think, an important case. And I would encourage people, go to firstliberty.org, get that, share that with people so that they know. Be praying for Lacey. And the other flight attendant that we're representing, who doesn't want her name public yet because she's under a lot of pressure and attack, pray for them. Let other people know this is wrong. If this is happening to you, do not let this happen to you. And this is the thing I think is so important right now. We're seeing this. We're going to talk about other things. There's an attack going on right now against all of our freedoms, okay? Whether you're trying to run your business, whether you're trying to live your life as a believer. And the only thing that's going to matter is whether people are going to stand up and say, no, this is not allowed in this country. We're not changing this country to where you're wanting to take us. And so the more people that know they have rights, the more people that know that there's others standing up, I think the better off we'll all be.
Again, you can go to firstliberty.org, or, of course, we have a link. The first link is Discrimination Doesn't Fly. Either way, my assignment to you is it's about 3.5 minutes, just a nice video to watch. You'll see what an outstanding woman Lacey is, and be praying about it. People always said, what can we do? We're doing something about it right here at First Liberty. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you look at some of the COVID numbers, you will find that the statistics defy the spin placed on it by politicians and the media. That's the argument that Charles Cook uses in his latest commentary. All you need to do is look at the chart linked to my commentary to see that any spin by Democrats or Republicans or media personalities is wrong. His opening statement is also his conclusion. 2 presidents, 50 states, 195 countries, a multitude of different approaches, and still there's no rhyme or reason to this pandemic. If you look at the COVID death rate per 100,000 by state, you don't find any pattern. The spin we get from politicians and the media would have us believe that blue states would all be bunched in one area of the chart and red states would be bunched in the other. That is not what you find. Some liberal media commentators would have you believe that red states are bad and blue states are good. Another writer says the North is good and the South is bad. Charles Cook has an answer for all those comments. If it were, what could possibly account for the death rate pairings of New York and Mississippi, of Alabama and Connecticut, of Michigan and Arkansas, of Texas and Delaware, of Idaho and Colorado? Or consider what is happening in Israel. I was supposed to be heading a tour to Israel. That's not happening, even though Israel has had heavily enforced lockdowns, mask mandates, and the most successful vaccination program anywhere. Yet the first country to fully vaccinate a majority of its citizens now has one of the world's highest daily infection rates. As I've said in previous commentaries, we need a bit more humility when making statements about the pandemic, and I might add we should ignore all the spin, which is proven to be false. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we want to spend some time, if we can, talking about the message yesterday by President Joe Biden. It might take a little while, but we're doing our best because ultimately it is a plan to force all private businesses with more than 100 employees to make their workers get inoculated with the vaccine or else face weekly testing. And then also, of course, the mandate that all federal employees, although I just heard the other day, now they made an exception for the postal workers. I guess that shows the power of the Postal Workers Union. But I want, first of all, to have Kelly Shackelford address the constitutional and legal issues. And if I have time, I want to talk about the fact that even if you accept all the assumptions made by President Biden, it still doesn't lead to a logical scientific conclusion.
Well, the biggest one is that this will protect vaccinated employees from the unvaccinated ones. Why do you need to do that? What's the point of a vaccine?
Yeah, well, and I'll get into the science, but even before we get into the science, there are a lot of people that are calling it tyrannical, authoritarian, anti-American. You've got the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, saying, how did we get to a point in this country where we could not let people earn a living because of their choice on the vaccine? That's one of the articles we've posted for you to read. But Kelly, help us out with a constitutional issue here.
Well, there's so much in this to talk about. I would start with something you didn't even ask about, which is the tone of his speech. I thought I cannot ever remember any president trying to divide Americans and make them to hate one another, and it was clearly what he was doing. I mean, he was saying that the vaccinated should be angry at the unvaccinated. He was angry. It was the most unpresidential action I think I've ever seen. It's almost like he wanted to start a war between and put people into segments. It's clearly tyranny. I mean, let's go by their words, okay? I've just got a few things here.
Okay.
His CDC director said in July, the end of July, not very long ago, there will be no nationwide mandate. There will be no federal mandate. Okay? You've got Anthony Fauci. Federal vaccine mandates for the general public would be, quote, encroaching upon a person's freedom to make their own choice of their own health. This is Fauci. Okay? Joe Biden. I don't think the vaccine should be mandatory. I would never demand it to be mandatory. Okay?
Yeah.
Jen Psaki, it's not the role of the federal government to force Americans to get vaccinated. I mean, they know this is, this reminds me a lot of what they did with evictions. They knew it was unconstitutional. They knew the court had told them it was unconstitutional for them to think that the CDC had power to tell people that they couldn't charge rent, and what did they do? He did it anyway. He kind of admitted when he did it anyway. So I think this is the same kind of thing. This is trying to be a tyrant. This is thinking you can maybe get away with it, but even if you don't, it'll be kind of virtue signaling. There are going to be so many. I mean, when these OSHA regulations are finally released, there'll be so many lawsuits that are going to hit. I mean, including by us. By the way, if listeners don't know, OSHA applies to churches. So you now have the federal government telling the church what they will do with regard to their own employees and vaccination. I mean, you can't do this. If you want to pass a law to do this, you could pass a law to mandate vaccinations. It would then go into court and be challenged, and you would have a constitutional. But we don't have a dictatorship here. The president can't say, "Oh, I'm going to make one up myself. I'm going to do, quote, an end run," which is what his people have said, around the Constitution by thinking that I can just add an OSHA regulation and massive penalties and take over all of private business. This is, just outrageous. I want to point something out to everybody, though. In addition to the OSHA, we also have him trying to force everybody who does business with the federal government,
right.
The federal employees, they all have to be vaccinated.
And they don't even get any kind of testing exception. They just have to get it.
Here's what's not being discussed. They all have a right to religious exemption under the law and under the Constitution. So one of the things, if people go to firstliberty.org, at the very top, there's a kit.
Yeah.
It's the Religious Liberty Protection Kit for vaccine mandates, whether you're in the military, whether you have a private employer, whether you have a government employer. The law protects you. You just need to know that the law protects you. And it even has sample exemption forms. And the vast, vast amount of people that are contacting us, they just go there, get it, do it, and they get their exemption. So don't think that there's no out for you. Don't be intimidated or bullied. If you have a religious objection, you have a right to have that exemption and accommodation. And all the info is there at firstliberty.org for people to meet it. I just want people to know that no matter what happened, even if everything he's doing was upheld, the law still allows for religious exemption. So, but I think what he did, especially on OSHA with all the businesses, that's going to go down in flames all over the country. I don't know how many lawsuits are going to be filed. It's going to be fast. It's going to be governors filing lawsuits, attorney generals. They're going to be churches. They're going to be, and you're going to see this thing being declared unconstitutional, I think, all over the country in different lawsuits.
Let me just mention real quickly that we do have that link for First Liberty. I was at my doctor's office yesterday, and when he found out I was one of these religious people, he said, one of the things I've been trying to find is for some of my patients that want to get a religious exemption. And I said, oh, well, First Liberty has this. I showed him on my phone. He said, what was that again? And I showed him the picture of the Religious Liberty Protection Kit, and he was ready to go. And so that was kind of like multiplied because there were apparently a lot of people that he actually has as patients that wanted to know about that, and he had no idea you existed, even though he lives in the Dallas area. But now he does, and he's passing it on to everybody.
Well, the stories are so neat that I'm hearing from our attorneys where people are calling in and they're distraught. They're like, my career, my 40 years, everything I've done is now over. And they go, no, you have rights. Here's what the law is. And they call back 2 days later weeping, saying, thank you for saving my career. It's just a matter of people not knowing the law that's there for them. I mean, we're not even doing anything 99% of the time. We're just saying, here's the law. We're not having to write anything, do anything. It's just they do it. It's just people don't know the rights that they have.
So all kinds of governors are already saying, they're going to push back. I mean, I have a list of quotes of governors, but the one from South Carolina, Henry McMaster, he said, the American dream has turned into a nightmare under President Biden and the radical Democrats. They have declared war against capitalism, thumbed their noses at the Constitution, and empowered our enemies abroad. Rest assured, we'll fight them to the gates of hell to protect the liberty and livelihood of every South Carolinian. So you have other governors, Brian Kemp of Georgia, Tate Reeves of Mississippi, Doug Ducey of Arizona, and on and on. So people are going to stand up against this. Now it's $14,000 per violation that can be charged to a company who does not implement this. That's a lot of money, even for a large company, per violation, if you've got hundreds of employees that are not getting vaccinated. And the other question I had in looking at this is, what about people who have had COVID? They totally ignore people who have had COVID. And we're seeing more and more about, and I mean, Kelly, you've been saying this all along, but we're seeing more and more that antibody can actually be better than from the vaccine, way better, a lot of times more robust. And, if they're going to spend money, I mean, they love to spend money and use COVID as an excuse. Why not do antibody tests on all the people that have had it and see how good the antibodies are out there? And, then they can start seeing that, if you've had it, it shouldn't be anyway. But if you've had COVID, they're forcing people to get
of course,
the vaccine.
You don't make money off of that.
That's for sure.
And so the big pharma and Fauci and everybody else, they're making billions of dollars on the vaccines. There is zero excuse for there not to be much more public, CDC, everybody else, on natural immunity. The Israeli studies.
There is no excuse.
Yeah.
I
mean, most of the studies have been Israeli studies because they don't necessarily produce vaccines, so it's not a big deal for them other than to try to figure out this spike that they're dealing with right now.
Over 700,000 people in their study. It's not like it's a small sample. And like one of them, it was 6.7 to 1. The vaccine is less effective than natural immunity. I think the other one was 13 to 1. That you're 13 times more protected if you have natural immunity versus getting the vaccine. The idea that those people would be forced to have a vaccine or they'd be punished it doesn't even meet what we call in the law a rational basis, which means a law doesn't even have to violate anything. It's just irrational.
Well, the phones have already started ringing, so we might as well open up the phones. 1-800-351-1212. We come back, I'll give you just very short, and only like a minute or two, of some of the scientific issues as well that are based upon flawed assumptions that were behind this mandate, which I don't think is going anywhere. There are going to be so many lawsuits. We'll be talking about this for weeks. But if you want to know more, we have posted some information about that on the website at pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again talking about the vaccine mandate. A lot of different issues that we'll try to put on the table, but we also have a number of phone calls coming in. We'll take some of those in just a minute. Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter.
You know, when this hit yesterday, I mean, of course, it was, I think a lot of Americans, and our phone calls show it, had a really emotional response to just the hubris of an announcement like this and the sheer sort of tyrannical White House that we have right now. I mean, why would President Biden do this? I think it's because the far left, he really does everything the far left wants him to do. I mean, it's showing up in everything that's coming out of this White House right now. No holes barred, really. And I don't know if any of it has to do with just his cognitive situation, that he has no filter, no smarts to say this is not politically smart to do. I don't know. But, you know, when you think of some of the things, like, for instance, Kelly mentioned the eviction moratorium, which was done early on, but he extended it through the Centers for Disease Control, and he said he knew it was unconstitutional, but he was going to go ahead and do it anyway. Again, such arrogance. This time, he's got to know this is unconstitutional, but he's going ahead and doing this anyway. And then there's just one more huge thing this week, and that is, you know, last week we talked about the heartbeat law that passed in Texas. And it was passed in a way that the Supreme Court could not issue an injunction, because really it's not federal officials that are going to be enforcing this. It's going to be private citizens that would have to bring lawsuits. So who do you sue? So the Justice Department and Merrick Garland is coming back and saying they're going to sue Texas over the heartbeat law, which they're not really going to be able to do.
They don't have standing. Yeah.
So these people are just, they are
hair on fire kind of reaction.
They have their hair on fire.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I do think that eventually, you know, this will shake out, because we still have courts. We still have a constitution.
Yep.
I hope so.
Well, again, we want to take some phone calls. Let me just, and since we may not get to all those, Penna Dexter's commentary today is so well done, and it has to do with the Texas heartbeat law. We have one about the Justice Department bringing suit against the government, and then the United Nations and all that that you pointed to, the human rights experts complaining about this, and then one on masking school children. So we've got a lot to cover, but let me take some calls, because some of you want to ask Kelly a question or Penna a question, so feel free to do so. Let's go to Stacy in the state of Texas. What would you like to ask or comment on?
And I'll text you information. Okay. All right. Hello. Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, this is Stacy. Sorry. I'm sorry.
You're on the air, Stacy.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, I actually filed exemption several years here as a travel nurse. I've been a nurse for 27 years in the OR. And recently I had my pastor write the letter, where before I could just sort of decline based on religious or other exemption. But this year in March, I filed on the basis of religious, with him writing a letter along with other forms filling out, you know, Article, I think it's 7 or whatever, that it violates the First Amendment right. But I know several people, unfortunately, all over the country, all scrub techs, nurses, physicians, who are bullied. They're told they're going to lose privileges if they don't get the flu shot, if they don't get the COVID vaccine. You know, and I just try to tell people, do not quit. If they have to, if they want to terminate you, let them terminate you so that you can seek legal counsel. But by no means, you know, quit on your own accord, and that there's hope. You can. Sure.
Let me give Kelly just a chance to react, because she was successful, but you found other people have been successful too, haven't you?
Yeah, and we've even had people like, I'm thinking of a doctor that you know, he had 3 different hospitals, and he had to submit to all 3 of those hospitals, and one of them denied him the first time, and he resubmitted, and they granted it. So as she says, don't give up. The law is on your side. And even in situations where they've denied it, I know there was one public case, it wasn't our case, it was down in Methodist Hospital down in Houston, where there were 4 different nurses who were denied their religious exemption. And the attorney sent a letter and said, all right, we're about to come after you. And I think it took maybe 24 to 48 hours. All of a sudden, publicly, it was, well, we've reviewed those again, and we've now provided those exemptions. So the law provides for that, and it protects that. And so if people need to know the information, which is just go to firstliberty.org. There's a religious liberty protection kit for vaccine mandates. It lays out whatever your situation is, what your rights are. You can ask for an exemption. You do not have to have your pastor agree. Now, some companies are asking for that, but if they don't, you don't have to have that. It's irrelevant under the law because, like, let's say you're Catholic. Well, the Pope says that it's okay to take the vaccine, so therefore you don't have an exemption. That's not the way it works. You don't have to have religious beliefs that your denomination agrees with, that your pastor agrees with. The only question in the law is, are they sincerely held religious beliefs that you have? If they are, they're protected. And we value religious freedom in this country. And no, you can't force everybody into some denominational box. People have their own beliefs, and as long as they're sincere, there's a right to protect those.
Let's go to South Carolina. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Hi there. Yes, my question was, I was wondering what the basis of the law is to require school-age students to be vaccinated in order to come to school, especially since they're required to go to school. And then is that something that they can apply to adults in the workplace or society?
Yeah, it's just them coming up with their own rules, right? And wherever that is. And
like California.
Yeah, like I know LA is doing this. Of course, number one, there's going to be a right to religious exemption, okay? Because that's in the Constitution, it's in the federal law, it's in the state law, it's pretty much everywhere. And so there's going to be rights to ask for those things. But if you've got something that's not covered directly, you're going to have people argue it violates medical privacy. You're going to have all kinds of arguments can be made against the government. And they admitted that. I saw in L.A. that their attorney was speaking publicly saying, we realize that we're going to be in a lot of lawsuits as soon as. But This is this same approach that, we'll just push for, even if it's unconstitutional what we're doing, we'll just push and see how much of this we can bully people into doing. Ultimately, the problems at school districts, and I would encourage everybody who's listening to this, is who did you elect? And if they're doing really bad stuff that does not reflect the values of your community, then change, who you put in those positions. I mean, we're seeing that happen. Now, I know LA, places like that's a very difficult thing, and you're going to have to fight for your rights in that situation. But
this is a great opportunity for people to see who and what they've got in office now,
Absolutely.
Even in California.
I mean, I just saw a lawsuit. I was just reading a lawsuit on the way in that was filed in Allen, Texas, which is kind of north of the Dallas area, a more conservative district. Their school board let people decide, the kids and their parents,
about
whether
masks.
you want your child to wear a mask or not. Parents filed a lawsuit to try to force them to put masks on kids. And that's the lawsuit's been filed. You're like, well, that's not going to work because parents have the authority over their children in this country, not the government. And so I just think of the arrogance of some parents thinking they're going to tell other parents what they're going to do with regard to their children. But those are things. So it matters who your school board is because it'll reflect in the policy that comes out. But again, as a religious liberty organization, just know that in all of these situations, at the very end, even if these laws happen, even if these things occur, there's always religious freedom protection. So don't let people bully you out of your beliefs. I mean, you think of it, there are whole religions that do not take any vaccines, right? And so the idea that the government, you can imagine, we don't force them to do that. We don't force them to violate their faith in that way.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we go to the break, those of you listening online can hear Penna Dexter's commentary on the Texas heartbeat law. And it is kind of interesting that it's a law, because we've had 12 other states that have passed heartbeat bills that didn't become a law, because this one is a little bit different in that you really don't have the state of Texas implementing this. You have the possibility that an individual can bring a lawsuit individually against the abortion provider. And so when we come back, we may get into that as well, but we do have a full bank of phone calls, as you might imagine, on this issue as well. So I did want to mention that Penna Dexter's commentary is there. Also one about the Justice Department bringing suit against Texas in that regard, and even human rights experts wanting to fiddle with the Texas law.
Well, the UN is now saying that it's a human right to have an abortion. Reproductive rights
how about
are
a human right
rights.
to not kill babies in the womb?
Right.
But, okay, I'm missing that one. Okay, we'll come back and take some phone calls. Obviously, there'll be a lot more to cover than we'll have time to do so, but we will do our best right after these important messages.
Once in a while, a law is enacted that shocks us in the way it illuminates the difference between good and evil. This happened on September 1st, when Texas's new heartbeat law went into effect. Here's what conservative writer and podcaster Matt Walsh said about it, quoting him, "If you have ever had any doubts about which is the bad side in the culture war, this week ought to clear up your confusion. Leftists are mad, screamingly, deliriously mad, that fewer babies will die in Texas. A lot fewer babies will die. The law bans abortions when there is a detectable fetal heartbeat, which typically occurs around 6 weeks into a pregnancy. It's estimated that 80 to 85% of abortions performed in Texas take place after 6 weeks gestation. That the law will remain in force is not a given. Other states have introduced and even passed heartbeat bills only to see them blocked in court. Texas's law is written in a way that makes this more difficult and time-consuming. The Supreme Court, in allowing the law to take effect, only delayed consideration of its constitutionality. In the interim, many, many babies will be saved. Unsurprisingly, the pro-abortion left, fearing the demise of Roe, is apoplectic. President Biden promised a whole-of-government response to insulate women and providers from the impact of the new law. In one odd statement, he seemed to repudiate numerous prior statements and declare he does not believe life begins at conception. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's scheduling a vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe and invalidate nearly all state-level restrictions on abortion. Heartbeat bills won't destroy Roe, but they make an unambiguous statement that abortion snuffs out a human life. This fall, Mississippi's ban on abortions after 15 weeks will be argued before the Supreme Court. The good guys hope the decision will overturn Roe, ending any notion that the Constitution contains a right to abortion. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention on Monday we may get into more of the science, but I thought I would at least add this so that you can think about it over the weekend. Nature magazine, or Nature Journal, which is the preeminent medical and scientific journal for the UK, has concluded that this virus will be endemic. Now, what does endemic mean? It means it'll be around forever. And the reason they say that is they did surveys of 90% of immunologists, virologists, and infectious disease disease researchers, and they say, we've looked at this enough to say it's never going to go away. Why? Well, because most coronaviruses never go away. And eventually we may have a situation where children may, in the future, be born, they get the virus, they fight it off with natural immunity, and they go on about their lives. And there have been a few diseases we've got rid of, smallpox being the most outstanding one, but this is not one of those. And so that's the first thing you have to realize. The president is really upset about 80 million Americans that are, quote, unvaccinated. You go back and look at that. You realize that some of them might have actually gotten one vaccine, and I'm willing to estimate that maybe 40 million of those 80 million actually have natural immunity, which he didn't even talk about. And so then you have to say, well, even if you forget that, how about the fact that we have 50 million school children who by definition are not vaccinated and will not be vaccinated till 2022? So if your end game is to eventually get rid of this disease, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to happen. And then think about all the people that come to this country from another country. I was the other day at a doctor's office. Most of his patients are from India, and only 40% of the people in India have been vaccinated. How about the neighboring country of Bangladesh? Only 12% of those individuals have been vaccinated. My daughter just came back from Africa. Nigeria, 1.8%. So even if we could vaccinate everybody in America, and it isn't happening, you still have the reality of the fact that as soon as you have air travel, which we will, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of that. And so it sounds like a great idea to try to eliminate this, but it just isn't going to happen.
Well, not to mention all the people coming in from our southern border
of course.
that are being shipped into the interior of the country that we know many of them were COVID positive.
It's irrational. That's the thing. And that's the thing that even people who might be interested in taking the vaccine, they're watching this and they see that what's going on is irrational. They're being lied to. I mean, for instance, if you were the CDC and all these people, the Faucis, and what you wanted was for people to not get, COVID or die from COVID, the first thing you would be elevating would be people who have natural immunity, because all the natural immunity people, all the studies are showing that's the safest thing. So you would start with those people, you would elevate that, you would then say, but they don't do that. They hide the ball. They say, well, I didn't tell you that because I didn't think, that would be good for you to hear then. And they lie to you about things that later they have to go complete 180 on. They've just lost the confidence because they have no credibility at this point. And people see through that. And, of course, they're naturally scared. They're naturally like, well, I can't listen to anything you say. And I really worry about this and what it means to the future after this. Can you trust your doctor anymore? I think people still kind of trust their doctor, but I'm beginning to wonder, can you trust a scientist anymore? I don't think so. I don't think people do. I think this has been really damaging to the country. And it's what happens when you have a culture that has moved away from God, that doesn't believe in truth, that thinks that the ends justifies the means, and they just lie. And we're seeing it in the media. We're seeing it, with scientists. We're seeing it with doctors now. We saw it with the protest, right? All those people that signed it saying that somehow the coronavirus wasn't dangerous if you were protesting for the right issues. We had 1,000 experts sign that. So I think there's a big sort of meta issue going on about truth and about telling the truth and about being honest and about having an open discussion, which is not allowed anymore. So those are bigger issues to talk about in the future. But I think it's really sad, and I think it's perfectly understandable for people to be very skeptical of what they're being told because it doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of times.
It's really the selective dissemination of truth. And, the American people are smarter than that.
Yes.
And, one of the things that we do have is we have now so many outlets for dissemination of ideas and articles and social media. The people, they can't just sit there and believe what the government says. I mean, because they've been lied to, they're not going to. everybody across the country has the opportunity to find out what the truth is, or at least to seek out different opinions than what they're hearing from the mouth of a president now who, and a White House and an administration who they change their story all the time.
And we had a story this week with the CDC, who the emails came out that the only reason they were all of a sudden pushing for masks for children in schools was because the unions, it wasn't the science.
Teachers unions.
Yeah. And so...
Yeah, they changed on a dime because the teachers unions put pressure on them.
So that's the kind of reason why people look at this and they go, I can't trust these people.
Well, let me allow one more question. I wish we had more time, but again, Martha in Arizona, KNLB, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kerby. Thank you for speaking truth. My question was actually, how does the exemption, the religious exemption, differ for federal employees? Because I'm a federal employee, and I'm being told by the feds that because I got the flu shot, I can't object to the COVID vaccine. And the way they're rolling this out, I get emails daily. There's a meeting daily until you sign an attestation sheet. If you sign the sheet and say, choose not to attest to whether or not I had the COVID vaccine, you're treated as unvaccinated. You'll be required to twice weekly testing. And then they're even saying, and I work remotely, for goodness sakes, so people at low levels, they're basically going to fire us if we don't comply. And I mean, weekly testing, that's invasive and it's not accurate. So, I mean, the feds are being crushed. And for a doctor, you may be able to fight back, but for a person at my level, you can't. And then they're going to force roll that into the public. So they're not accepting religious exemption for us. They're saying it's highly scrutinized and you have to prove it.
Yeah, well, I mean, people put in their request for an exemption. Federal law requires not only not discriminating against employees on the basis of their religion, but it specifically requires, quote, accommodation of the religion and the religious beliefs of their employees. So it's required by federal law. It's Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Additionally, you have the U.S. Constitution, which is required. So, I mean, they can say they're not going to follow that, but you know, a federal judge will tell them they'll have to follow that. So it's just a matter of following through. And they can't get in and say, well, because we have our beliefs about which vaccines you should or should not have taken in accordance with your religion. You're like, you don't have any authority to tell me what my religious beliefs are. I'll tell you what my religious beliefs are. And again, as long as they're sincere and these sincerely held religious beliefs, they're protected. So it's just, again, a lot of these people think they can do things, but when the push comes to shove, we're finding they back down more often than not. And when they don't, they're going to get sued and they're going to lose because they can't deny people religious exemptions because they don't like religious exemptions. It's federal law, and they have to follow that federal law.
Wish we had more time, but you can join us next week. We have Joel Rosenberg on to talk about enemies and allies. We have J. Warner Wallace, and his new book has now come out, and Michael Radenick. And, of course, a lot of that relates to the event that we talked about this weekend, because, after all, this is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Didn't even get to that today, so we'll cover maybe some of that on Monday. But have a great weekend, and find the articles we've mentioned, and we will see you back here on Point of View next week.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.